Let's take a trip back in time. 1863. Battle of Gettysburg has just finished. It's December, Christmas is coming up. The Union set up a blockade around the South, and civil war is raging at this time. Because of the blockade, the South can't get in items that they need, just for daily household, just daily living. And the children will eventually feel this in December as Christmas comes, because without food and household items, well, toys can't get in either. So how is Santa going to deliver toys to the kids Christmas 1863? Well, parents needed to explain this to their children why they wouldn't be getting presents that year. They said that Santa cannot get around the blockade. So, according to some 1863 diaries from children would take a map or a globe and they would trace a route for Santa to follow. And then they would write to Santa and send him that letter. Not the traditional way of sending letters. I'll explain how they sent letters back then, how children sent letters to Santa. But they traced the routes for Santa to try to get around this blockade. Now, other parents who had a deep-seated hatred of the Union and who lived in the South, they simply told their kids that Santa wouldn't be delivering presents because the Union shot and killed Santa. And this instilled that same hatred for the Union that the parents themselves held. But Santa did come back after the war, and he's been delivering presents to the South every year since. Now, the way that children would write letters to Santa and get their letters to him is they would burn the letters in a fireplace. So they would write letters, toss them in the fireplace, the letters were burned to ashes. Now, the idea behind this is that as the letters burned, the wishes from those letters would rise up out of the chimney and in smoke format flew on over to the North Pole where Santa would receive it. Now, of course, Santa didn't need a physical letter because he's Santa. He just needed to know the wishes. So these children wrote to Santa this way in the 1850s and 1860s. In the 1870s, they started writing to Santa and having those letters published in publications. And I have many, hundreds of those in the book I'm signing today, Dear Santa Claus, a little bit of a shameless plug, and over in the gift shop. But that is the earliest ways that children wrote to Santa, burning them in the fireplace. Anyone here familiar with the hidden pickle ornament? Yes? A few people? Okay. The hidden pickle ornament was popular during the 19th century here in America. It came over from Germany. It was a custom from Germany. Now, the way this worked was on Christmas Eve, parents would tell their children to go to bed early, in which Santa would then come in and hide this pickle somewhere deep within the tree. Now, on Christmas Day, the children would all get up out of bed and scramble over to that tree and try to be the first one to find this hidden pickle. The first child to find it received an extra present. Now, this wasn't just a game, there was also a lesson to be learned during this game, and that is to be observant in life. The child who is the most observant, who finds the pickle first, wins the extra prize, the extra present. Now, this is still played by households today throughout the country. I'm sure every child gets an extra present though now, but back then it was just whoever found the pickle first would get the extra present. Louisa May Alcott, best known for writing Little Women in 1869. In 1856, at the age of 23, Alcott wrote a book titled Christmas Elves. It was the first time that Christmas and elves appeared together in print. So why don't many people know about this book, Christmas Elves? And why isn't it readily available today? That is because the manuscript, for whatever reason, has either been lost or destroyed. Because of that, we don't know how Louisa May Alcott envisioned these elves. We don't know what role they played. Were they good? Were they bad? I like to think they're good. In terms of Christmas stories, we don't know what they looked like. Were they tall, short? We don't know any of this. It's all speculation because the manuscript, for some reason, has been lost to time. Anyone ever hear of the game Snapdragon? Snapdragon is a game that dates back centuries. In fact, William Shakespeare mentions it in several of his plays. This was a very popular game to play at both Halloween and Christmas. And the way the game was played was a bowl was filled with brandy, and then raisins were dropped into the bowl. The brandy was then lit on fire. The lamps or the candles were extinguished so that the only light in the room was produced by the flaming bowl of brandy. Then, everybody sitting around the table would take turns, one at a time, sticking their hand into the flaming bowl of brandy to pluck out a raisin from the bottom of it and eat it as fast as possible. The person who got burned the least amount of times was the winner of that game. As you can imagine, there were always injuries, and it was not uncommon for there to be house fires. And because of this game, Snapdragon, fell out of fashion in the late 19th, early 20th century. People actually liked living in a house, and they rather enjoyed not having injuries. So this game fell out of fashion fairly quickly. Now, Victorians loved playing with fire. They loved it. This was another game they played for Christmas. This game was simply called Apple and Candle. Now, the way this game worked was an apple was suspended by a light fixture from a string tied around the stem, and a candle was then stuck into the side of the apple and lit. The apple was then pushed and spun, so it wasn't just swinging, but also rotating rapidly. The object of this game is for everyone in a circle to take turns trying to catch the apple in their mouth without getting burned by the candle. As you can imagine, this was not the safest game to play, and it was not uncommon for people to miss biting the apple, instead bite down on the candle, burning their mouth, burning their face, lighting their hair on fire, whatever else may occur with playing with fire. This game, Apple and Candle, appeared in game books of the 19th century, but there were so many injuries as a result of playing it that by the early 20th century, when revisions of this book came out, it was then suggested to replace the candle with a packet of flour. So instead of potentially biting down on the candle and burning yourself, now you can just be hit in the face with a packet of flour over and over, potentially covered in it, depending on how many times you're hit. So a bit safer, but possibly a bit messier as well. So on New Year's Eve, actually, 12 candles would be lined up on a floor, about 2 feet apart. If it was a smaller room, they might be lined in a horseshoe pattern. But each candle represented a month of the following year. First candle for January, second for February, and so on. Everybody would take turns jumping over this candle one by one. Whoever jumped over a candle and did not extinguish it in doing so, the candle that represents that, or the month represented by that candle, would be one of luck for that individual. If that person jumped over a candle and did extinguish the flame in doing so, that month that candle represents would be an unlucky one for that individual. And then they can kind of mentally prepare themselves for the upcoming month. Think, well, this is not going to be good. But that was played mostly in larger homes where there was room to line them up all in a row. Now there was also, this was something done in wealthier neighborhoods, where if there was a single young lady, her parents, she would mostly likely be living with her parents at this time, her parents would throw open the front door New Year's Day, and all the eligible bachelors would come over and meet this young lady. As they come into the house and meet her, they sit and talk with her for a little while, for a few minutes, and they would leave their calling cards. So at the end of the night, she can go through all these calling cards she has. Maybe a certain bachelor stuck out to her that she would like to have come over and speak more at length, meet her parents. She would call him over and meet the parents. And if the parents, in fact, did approve of him, they would invite him over to spend some time alone, some more time alone with their daughter, in which this was used. Anyone ever see this candle holder or even own one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? If you eat at the Dobbin House while you're here, there's one on every table.
Yeah.
So these types of candle holders date back to the 1600s. But in the 19th century, they were called courting candles because they were used as a timer by the head of the household to time the suitor as he came over to visit his daughter. Now, with this courting candle, the top spiral is a timer itself. When the candle burns down to that top spiral, it's time for that suitor to leave. The visit is over. So, for the sake of this demonstration, it is the 19th century, and I'm a father with an adult daughter living with me, and she's having a suitor come over. For whatever reason, maybe I don't approve of this young man. I don't think he's good for her. I don't want him courting my daughter, let alone spending a lot of time in my home. Keeping in mind the top spiral is a timer. I'm going to lower this candle to a very low spiral. That's how much time that suitor has to visit my daughter. That's not a lot of time. Now let's say my daughter's having a suitor over who I do like. I think he's good for her. I approve of him. I'm going to raise this candle to a higher spiral. Now look how much time that suitor has to visit my daughter. A lot more than the last guy. As head of the household, I can extinguish this candle at any time if I feel this visit needs to end early, or if the candle is naturally extinguished, I can replace it with another, light it, leave the two alone, and again, when it burns down to that top spiral, it's time for that suitor to leave, the visit is over. And that is how the courting candle was used by families throughout the country during the 19th century. And with that, I am now going to hand you back over to Aaron to complete the rest of this Jennie Wade House tour. Thank you all. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here in Gettysburg. Thank you very much.